You are listening to episode 10 of the Psoriasis podcast with Joe Ridley. Welcome back to series 1 of the podcast, where each week we talk to an expert to help us navigate our imperfect healthcare system so we can make more informed decisions about our health. Today we are talking to Joe Ridley. She is the creator of The Body Talks, an online program designed to help transform the way we approach healing. She specializes in transitioning the body from stress to well-being using the body's own healing mechanism, which is something that I'm really interested in. As someone who has moved from a highly stressful job that really impacted on my skin, I think it's really important to find out how to listen to what our bodies are telling us. We spend most of our lives trying to ignore what's going on. So today we're going to focus on looking at how we can identify that the body's under stress, looking at several different causes of stress and some strategies that we can use to try to get those under control. Now, Joe has a really interesting story. So we're going to start off, if you don't mind, Joe, talking about how you got to where you are, and then we'll dive straight into learning about how our bodies tell us we're stressed and what we can do to listen.
Sure. So I've always been a real doer, and my work has always been quite intense. So I've spent many years working on expeditions and doing residentials with young people. So my whole life was really about efforting very much, doing a lot of and working very long hours. And actually this resulted in burnout. So I got very ill, and I realized in reflection that a lot of it was really to do with trying to prove myself. It was coming from a sense of unworthiness and, wanting to get out there and, show that I was capable and I could do all of these things. And also an inability to really meet my needs. I was always putting other people's needs in front of my own. And it's a long story, but what it resulted in is an entire year of, to begin with, I got infections in all of my body. I had about 7 different ones in a row. And then I was diagnosed with post-viral fatigue and then chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was bedridden for approximately 3 or 4 months, where I would wake up and I'd have a dizzy, foggy head, heart palpitations, absolutely no energy, sleeping 18, 19 hours a day, feelings of nausea. But now I see it as one of the biggest gifts of my life, really, because I now see it was a protective mechanism, and I can go into more detail about what I mean by that. But it's during that time, my relationship with my health and my body and life and everything completely transformed. And I am now genuinely the healthiest I've ever been, and the happiest. So yeah, I don't if that's enough, but it really, for me, I see it as a gift now, and that's not obviously always the case. There was challenges, and it was difficult at the time.
Yeah. Talked about you're grateful because you had a protective mechanism. What do you think the protective mechanism was? Was it the stress causing your body to be vulnerable, or was it something else?
So for me, what I realized is that, we have this stress response, which is it's a survival mechanism. It's the way the body protects us from certain things. So and one of the first things that I needed to do was realize what was actually happening in the body when I was in this response, and, the cortisol being flooded into the bloodstream, and how it was stopping it was drawing blood away from the internal organs, and it was suppressing my immunity. It was even, I say me, this is what happens to all of us, obviously. And in the brain, even, it suppresses parts of the brain which are able to kind of logically think out and have that kind of broader view, and makes you more reactionary. So when we're in that stress response, it just really compromises our health. And for me, I was in a heightened stress response for, I really think it was probably over 10 years, but more extreme in the last 2 years before the burnout. So the reason I see that as a protective mechanism is because there's a reason for the stress response. It's not just completely random. I mean, I know that in our far past, it would have been because there might have been a tiger that had come up, and like, so your body would have gone into that state to protect you because you want to be able to run. You don't want to be thinking logically. You want to be reactionary. You want to, the blood rushes into your arms and legs so that you can get out of the situation. The problem is now there are so many things that create stress in our lives. Our modern life is complex, and so the reason I see it as a protective mechanism is because things like, for me, I've got like not a long list, but a reasonable list of things that I think that I've researched into that stimulate the response. But for me, the main ones were not having my needs met. So these were like basic things around the amount of sleep I needed or the diet I was eating. And so for me, if I was able to just carry on doing that without any consequence, without any physical consequence, that's really dangerous. So the protection for me is in the fact that the body goes, this isn't, what you're doing isn't healthy and good for you. This is so I see it as a way of the body communicating to me initially through the stress response, which then turns into symptoms. And now I really listen. So for me, if there's something that's creating a lot of stress in my life, instead of medicating the symptoms and dealing with all the consequences, I get curious and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like, what is it that what do I need to up level, or what do I need to address? Okay. Does that make sense? So that's how I see it as a protection, because if we were allowed to do all these things like, eat really terrible food and not look after our needs, have really sort of shaky boundaries, all of these things, and there was no consequence for it. It's kind of scary thought, isn't it, really?
It's a scary thought.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said about asking why, because in a previous episode we talked to naturopath Maya Harish, and she was talking about the same thing, about how important it is, instead of medicating the symptoms, to ask the bigger questions. So it's really nice that everyone seems to be singing from the same hymn sheet. Now, I really wanted to talk to you because I'm really interested in stress, and you've touched on that quite a lot already. So with psoriasis, there's the vicious cycle of psoriasis is stressful. It's also triggered by stress. So you get psoriasis because you've got stress, or maybe another trigger. Having psoriasis makes you more stressed, which makes your psoriasis worse, which gives you more stress. So we end up living in a sort of downward spiral. And I've had a similar experience to you where I've had burnout before, and I was quite oblivious to quite a lot of the symptoms of stress. And I think a lot of people don't actually realize quite how stressed they are. What kind of things would people look for if they were trying to assess whether they were under stress?
Good question. So I think I would start by asking, like, what does it feel like to be relaxed? Like, can you remember? Because, that as a touch point is really useful. Like, what is it to you when you feel like, you're quite in your body, you have that kind of sense of relaxation. And when we sort of touch on that, we can sometimes realize we haven't been there for quite a long time.
Right.
Because I think stress is experienced so differently. I think people experience it differently. And also, like you say, it becomes very normal. For me, it was normal. I was just like, I was in an adrenal state for pretty much all the time. So that was just how I was. So I would say, but I would also say that we've all at some point experienced deep relaxation and a sense of even being in a relaxed state and being able to deal with like quite a lot of things going on. It doesn't, because one thing that I feel very passionately about is that it's moving from this paradigm of pushing and efforting and doing and like trying to make everything happen to actually being more in a kind of relaxed flow state, which actually you can be just as productive in. And I'm not saying that's easy, and I feel like I'm still transitioning into a different way of working. But I suppose I would just ask, can you possibly imagine being relaxed and in the doing?
Well, I think the comparing it to when you're totally relaxed is actually quite good, because you're just a completely different person, aren't you, when you're totally relaxed?
Yeah, and you're using different parts of the brain.
So what are the main triggers for stress then, and what do you suggest we can do to relax the nervous system?
So I did this from my own personal experience, but also afterwards, and I did a lot of research. So I really condensed it down to around 8 main triggers. Okay. And the first one is having our needs met. So this can be anything from, your living situation, the food that you're eating, the amount of water, fresh water that you're drinking, all of that kind of stuff. So are you having your needs met? And when you aren't, it can definitely trigger the stress response. And I'm sure we all experience that. Like sometimes you're in a situation you just can't get the basic things that you need, even if it's just a little rest or something, but you have to keep going, that kind of thing. And that stimulates it. And for me, the solution with that one is firstly getting clear, because sometimes we don't even give ourselves just a little bit of time to think about what are our basic needs, and so a bit of reflection and just thinking about it, and then just having ways of communicating that healthily to the people that potentially that we need to communicate that to, and prioritizing it as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Making other people aware that it is a priority now. Yeah. I've had that with my husband today, prioritizing my self-care recently.
Yeah.
It needs to be on, if you're working as a team with anyone at work or at home, it needs to be on everyone's agendas.
Totally. And if we can become aware and talk about it and be like, this is what I need to feel good, and because it makes you more productive, happy, all of it, then we can support each other in that. But when we don't know what the other person needs, it's actually very difficult to meet that, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So the other one is boundaries. So this is something I think we should be taught at school, what's your yes and what's your no, and like where is your boundary? So often people cross over it, but we get like, that can stimulate the stress response. And really the solution to this is, again, getting clear on what are my boundaries, like what am I willing to accept and not accept, what am I willing to be in my space, and then learning things like, there's things called like MVC, which is nonviolent communication, which is something that you guys could look up. There's some amazing books, even just on Amazon, and just ways to communicate our boundaries in a kind of healthy way, so that we're not blaming and criticizing, but we're letting other people know what we need and what our boundaries are. So that's another really good one, and actually a really important one at work.
Can you give an example of a workplace boundary then?
Yes, let's think. So for example, at work, sometimes when we need to have a good balance of like fun and work and responsibility. Otherwise, again, actually, that's another thing that can stimulate it. If we're just constantly on the kind of go and like work, and not bringing in the joy and the fun and the pleasure. So an example at work would be that actually maybe this weekend I'm not going to be available at all, or after 5 o'clock I'm not going to be available at all. And I know I've come across people in the past where there's real pressure from their bosses or people who they're working with to be available all the time. And so that's definitely a good boundary, and to be communicated in a calm way, and like this is when I'm not going to be available from here to here, and this is why, and is a good one. And when it's more kind of personal relationships, I would really recommend reading. I don't have time just now to go through the MVC because it's such a big subject, but it's brilliant, and it's a way of really asking the question, like, how can we make this life more enjoyable for ourselves? How can we make this life better? And communicating from that space. So, and then the third one that I've come across is unfair treatment. So this comes from self and other. And so often we, I've done some work with an amazing psychologist, Marissa Peer, and she says, one of the core beliefs that we all have is that we're not enough. And all of us have that to varying degrees. So no one's alone in this. I think we feel alone in it, but we're not. Like, we all feel it, right? And because of this actually very false belief, it's not true. We're completely worthy of everything. We're totally enough. But because of that, we can really treat ourselves quite badly, and we can, there's all that kind of chatter that goes on in the mind, not good enough, all of this.
Yeah.
And that's really stressful for the body, actually. And it's based on a false belief. So I do a lot of work around, allowing people to really see that they're totally worthy. I think we're part of nature. So you would never, I always use this as an analogy, but you wouldn't go up to a tree and be like, you're not really cutting it at the moment. Like, you should probably try a bit harder, like, you're just not enough. You're not enough. You're not worthy of this life. And it's so in that context, it's completely absurd. And I think it's exactly the same with us as humans. We are totally worthy of all the goodness of life and totally good enough. So for me, the unfair treatment side of things is working on that. And then if it's external to us, again, NVC, if people are treating us in a way that is just not acceptable, whether it's work, home, friendships, anything, it's learning techniques on how to communicate that in a healthy, loving way, actually, and compassionate way.
So is this a book that you would recommend?
Definitely. It's called Nonviolent Communication. I think the title may be slightly longer than that, but if you Googled that, I'll put that in Amazon.
Yeah, I'll pop that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very good. Okay, so the next one is purpose. So very often what can create a lot of stress in people's lives is that they're spending their days doing things that they just don't want to do.
Oh, yeah.
And now having I think we all have a gift and something to give to the world. We all come here with amazing gifts. That doesn't mean that we need to monetize it necessarily at all. Like, it can just be something that you do as a joy. It might just be baking bread or making jam, like whatever it is. If it just brings you joy, it's part of your thing, And so it's not to say that we need to monetize all of our purposes and make sure we're 24/7 doing what we want. But we do need to be aware that sometimes if we're suppressing something that we really care about, like in the past, for me, singing is one of my biggest passions, right? But for many years I'm like, oh no, not now. It's
haven't got time.
Haven't got time right now to do it, or it's not banking or something that people are going to be like, oh well, I don't know. There's all these funny beliefs around it, but really, when we suppress those things, that creates stress in the body, because there's part of us that knows that there's something that we're not doing that we just love and that brings us joy, which really is the best way to get us into rest and repair.
Yeah,
which is the opposite of the stress response.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you find yourself at 10 o'clock at night working on your phone or your computer and you can't think of anything else to do, then you've definitely neglected your purpose, perhaps.
Yeah, and just taking a moment just to tune into that, in this moment, because I think we need to start giving ourselves permission to do the things that feel good,
Yeah.
We're brought up in a culture which just makes us feel like we need to sacrifice and push and make, do all these things, all these responsibilities. And it's not that that's a bad thing in some ways, but if we're looking at this as, as in a health context, actually, one of the best ways we can reset our immune system and reactivate it actually is by relaxing more, doing more of what we love, following those threads of excitement and passion that we have, because those are the things that actually then the body starts to produce oxytocin, dopamine, all these amazing things, and your body actually can heal, because it can't heal when it's in the stress response. It's not chemically in the body, it's not possible. So, and of course it can heal, if you have a cut and you're in the stress, it's going to heal, but I just mean on more of a real cellular level of really up leveling our health. We need to be more often than not in the rest and repair when possible, or at least aiming towards that.
Yeah. And most people, you would think they'd be really excited if you were right, in order to heal, you need to go and do your hobbies several hours a week. But people still find it quite stressful just trying to think about how they're going to fit in the extra hobby time, isn't it? Yeah. So what do you have any advice for people who struggle to find the time to rest and recuperate? Or should we talk about that later?
Definitely. No, definitely. Let's do it. So there's two things that come to mind with that. Is initially a lot, it does require kind of reviewing and like looking at things that, one exercise that I find really useful is to map out like what did I used to really love doing? What do I love to do now? And what would I really still love to do in the future? What are these things that are just, and just like to begin with, write it all down. And I know that may seem overwhelming if you don't feel you have the time, but then also what are some of the things that I don't need to be doing? I can actually cut out, or things that are really actually just not serving me anymore, and they're creating stress, and I just don't enjoy them.
Right.
And just be a bit brutal with that. I would. I mean, I think look at it all, like lay it all out, and go, okay, what can I do less of, and what do I want to do more of? And the key really is to move into inspired action and start making these changes. Also realizing that it's just these even just like little micro wins, these tiny little changes can make actually a really big difference. So we don't need to completely dismantle our life and create a new one. It's just but doing those reviews can be helpful, because you'll be like, oh god, yeah, I do that a lot, and it's not creating happiness, whether it's being on Facebook for 2 hours a day or what, I don't know, like, there's whatever it is, Netflix or something. Is there something that you can cut out? And just start making these little changes, because it's not, I mean, some people thrive off like totally doing everything, getting rid of everything, starting everything new. But I don't think that's necessary. It's a possibility, it's an option. But and then with the time thing, just realizing that we all have this sense of like, there's not enough time, and I've got too much to do.
Yeah.
And really, I know it's really counterintuitive, but when we're really in that belief and really in that state, the most, it's counterintuitive, but it works, is to stop and just realize, am I even breathing? Like, because often when you're in that like, you stop breathing, you're not in your body, and you're just scrabbling and trying to make things happen. And it's very much a mind state when you feel there's not enough time.
Yeah.
So my strong invitation, and I know it's not easy, is really just take a moment, even if it's 2 minutes, and just go, wow, am I breathing into my belly? Take a moment, breathe into your belly. And actually, because it's a mind state, it's very useful to get into the body and to do something physical, or like even I sometimes just have a little dance. And I don't know if that would work for everyone else, but like, or even just go for like a 5-minute walk and sit by a tree or something. And I know we may in that state just be like completely convince ourselves there's not time, but when you actually drop back into your body and start breathing again, you realize that it's all right, like no one's gonna, and then you can follow more inspired action. You're not just working off like adrenaline.
Yeah. So you're not reacting all of the time. You've been a bit more proactive with your activities, because you've taken some time out to bring yourself back to what you're doing. That sounds like a really good idea. We've got plenty of trees and need to get outside more.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other triggers have you got for us?
So another one is bad diet and gut health. This is something which, again, it's a massive subject, so I won't go into too much detail. But the gut itself is, I think I've read recently, like if you lay it out, it's the size of a tennis court. It's like it's a huge amount. And all of it's covered in like in its health, and it's most healthy. It's got all the kind of good bacteria and everything. But because our diets, prescriptive drugs and quite not such great diets, toxins in the environment, it does affect the biome in the gut. And really that's a large part of our immunity. So if we can repopulate the gut using probiotics and eating more nourishing foods, that can really help. And just to think about how the kind of food that we're eating, and are we nourishing our bodies and our brains? Because when we're eating bad foods, it can definitely put quite a lot of stress on the body. So yeah, big subject, but
that is a huge subject. And we've got an interview with Kezia Hall, and she is a gut specialist. So I'll put the link to that in the show notes. It's the episode that runs before this one. So she'll have gone into that into some depth. So if you've missed that, guys, go back and listen to the interview with Kezia Hall.
Yeah, so key. And I'd imagine would really help with psoriasis, actually, because it's a really interesting subject. So next one is suppressed and unexpressed emotions. So with this one, we're taught from a very young age, I think less as women, more as men actually, that certain emotions are wrong or bad. Actually, I'm going to take that back. No, I think we've just got different things that are less and more acceptable. So as women, we're kind of like anger, sort of, in a sense, is just less acceptable. And with men, sadness and tears, it's just like, you just don't go there. So, but what happens when we suppress these emotions is they get stored in our body memory, and that can create this stress response. And so with suppressed and unexpressed emotions, there's an amazing book which I really recommend, which is called The Body Keeps the Score. And I'm just going to read a quote from it, which is, repressed emotions are stored in somatic memory and expressed as changes in the biological stress response. And so really what they mean by that is that like somatic memory is the body. So when we push away certain emotions and make them wrong or bad, they get stored in the body, and then they create stress. So for me, what I've realized is that really emotions for us to have a kind of healthy functioning emotional system, we need to allow all emotions to flow through,
right.
And not make some good or bad, because really they are our interface with life. Like they are telling us something. They're not random. And again, such a big subject. One of my favorites actually is like looking at, so for example, anger is often when somebody comes over a boundary that we've set, or whether they're aware of it or not. So it's actually a way of us being like, okay, and so the healthy response to that is to use something like MBC to communicate. But when we just feel angry and don't say anything and go, and then just push it away and, I shouldn't feel anger, that's when it can create stress in the body. So it's just learning to be like, okay, great, this emotion is coming. Is this coming either as a response to something that's happening in my environment? And also sometimes, a lot of the time, our emotions are coming from the thinking mind. So we're overthinking or worrying or analysing.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, it's a pretty big subject, but essentially, for me, the work here is allowing things to move through. Allows the body to be more sort of healthy and vital.
Is this people speaking out more when their boundaries have been crossed, or finding someone to confide in, or maybe getting some counselling? Is that the kind of step someone would take? Yeah,
finding people who can support you and also there are different ways that there are different methods that you can use to sort of, there's things called like breath work, which allow the body just to kind of release some of the suppressed emotions as well. So there is different emotional release work you can do, which you always want to do with somebody who's qualified and has experience in it. And then having a counsellor or friend or somebody you can talk to about how best to communicate these things to people. Communicate your needs, communicate your boundaries, because that's what helps keep things in place and to feel more contained.
I think it's very easy for us to collect stress, and I watched a really interesting thing on emotional freedom tapping, EFT, and it was a guy whose neck was really stiff and he was a complete disbeliever, and just tapping and talking out the stress he was going through, he loosened his neck and he could turn his whole head. It was quite impressive, the change of just letting some of his emotions out on his physical health. And I think as well, when we're chronically ill, we lie to people around us so often and keep things inside so much because it's just so hard sometimes. And sometimes you just don't want to talk about it. Someone will say, how's your skin? Fine. How are you feeling today? Yeah, I'm okay. Just lying when inside I'm not fine, I'm not okay. But it's just easy to go through life. And so I suppose you're kind of squirreling that stress away, aren't you? And it's not helping in the long term.
Yeah. And I noticed that that's something I really relate to that. And I remember a time when I actually had a lot of shame around being ill. I was like, I couldn't believe, I felt, and I was hiding that side of me. I was like, I didn't want anyone to really know that and I think until I really accepted and allowed that shame to come out and guilt and all of it, I was really stuck in it, and it was maintaining my illness, I think.
Right.
Because I was hiding parts of myself from people. But there's a great thing in community and sharing how we really are, because I think we've grown up in a culture of people like, yeah, I'm fine. You can kind of tell they're not, and it's like, we're conditioned to feel a certain way, but how do we really feel? Because when we can get real with ourselves and be like, okay, then it can move, then it can start to transform and shift. But if we're just hiding away from it and not going there, then it just stays in the body, and that's the reality of it. I think there's two choices of ignoring it, or in some way starting to look at the things that maybe you don't want to look at and feel the things you don't want to feel. But I can guarantee you that at the other side of it, it's you feel healthier because you're not hiding yourself.
That's right. And when you have a friend who finally opens up that they've had a really hard time, you're so angry with them, aren't you? You're like, why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago? I had no idea you were going through this. And then when it's you going through it, you don't tell anyone either. And you get berated 6 months down the line when you have a breakdown, or, you have a health challenge on the outside that people can see. And so maybe we just need to think about how we'd feel if your best friend was going through what you're going through and didn't talk to you about it.
Yes, totally. Sometimes it's a really nice exercise to actually see, even talk to yourself like a best friend. Like, how would I treat myself that way as well? We can accept it from our friends, but can we start accepting it even from ourselves? Because that's another thing that can really bring us into rest and repair, is when we're not being so hard on ourselves.
Yeah, going back to negative self-talk. And
yeah, absolutely. And the final one is an interesting one, which is resentments. So there's a lot of studies now that have been done on if you're holding on to resentments towards other people, or you haven't forgiven somebody, that can actually cause stress in the body and inflammation. So it's interesting, and forgiveness is such a big subject as well. But it's not about, you don't even need to speak to that person. You don't even need to it's not about saying that what they did is okay. It's about coming to some sort of resolution and peace with what happened. And there are lots of techniques you can use to forgive. But yeah, that's the final one.
So this might sound a little bit unconventional, because normally when we talk about forgiveness, we're talking about, someone who's wronged us, like an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or a parent who's not done a very good job. But I think there's quite a lot of anger and resentment against people who've not helped us, like dermatologists, for example. I've had some really bad dermatologists, and I've resented them for a long time. And I've made peace with that now, but I think there is quite a lot of hostility in kind of unconventional relationships, like those with medical practitioners. So if someone is feeling angry to their dermatologist, it's obviously not very helpful, because they need that person to understand their problem so they can get the right treatment. What would you suggest for someone who is feeling hostility and resentment towards another person, like a friend or doctor or anyone, isn't it? It's all a kind of same emotional angst.
Yeah. So first of all is just not to deny any of it, and to feel everything. So we're not looking to kind of override this and go, oh, I shouldn't feel that, and I shouldn't feel bad. It's about really, it's like the emotion, allowing the emotions to flow. Really, the first step is to feel all of it without any judgment, really. Just be like, whether it's anger, sadness, frustration, all of those emotions, and nothing wrong with them. You just need to let them be expressed. And then at a certain point, it's like, is this, realizing really that if we hold on to that, feeling of resentment, it's causing us pain. And this isn't just me saying this. There's actually scientific research on this, that it can that it increases inflammation in the body and it stimulates the stress response, so creating symptoms. So if we're really, really stuck on wanting to feel resentment towards somebody, really we're hurting ourselves. So at that point, when you've allowed yourself to feel it all, have a scream, have a shout, do whatever you need to do, it's in some way trying to come to some sort of, it's not saying that it's okay what they did, or that you even need to tell them that you forgive them or have a conversation with them if you want. It's about going, okay, well, that's what's happened. It's just acceptance. Like, that's happened. They behaved in that way. And can we, usually after you've allowed yourself to feel it all and not make it all wrong, a sense of peace naturally arises anyway, because it's kind of, you've felt it all, you've expressed it. And sometimes I find, not all that often actually, sometimes there's a courageous conversation that needs to be happening as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to go to that person and go, actually, this happened. And then again, MVC is really important, which is, you would say, what you did made me feel frustrated. Would you be willing to do this instead? So it's something, it's not blaming or hating on them. It's like, it's just having a kind of healthy conversation. But sometimes that requires courage, depending on what the situation was, of course. But what we're looking at to achieve with forgiveness is really just an acceptance, that happens, and bring in a sense of peace and clarity around what you need in the future from that person or in a future relationship. I don't feel overwhelmed by this, because the way I see it is, all of these things, you can up level and work on these forever. It's never done. You're never like done with all these things, really. The purpose, it evolves. With forgiveness, there's always going to probably be somebody to forgive. Boundaries, they change. Needs, they change. So it's all about stuff like, it's just learning to become more self-aware of these areas, and not putting too much pressure on ourselves. Really bringing some like self-love and self-care in when we're looking to change things.
Yeah, and quite a lot of these sort of tie into each other, don't they? If you address negative self-emotions, then you might also be talking to friends and expressing other things, talking about maybe how your diet's affecting your mood, that kind of thing. Everything, I suppose, kind of all starts swimming together a little bit, doesn't it, in the end?
Definitely.
So is there anything else? We've talked about all of the things that can lead to stress, and we've touched on some of the things that we can do to try and start healing. Is there anything else that we can do to get into this state of rest and repair? So
the biggest thing that I realised is that when we're really in our minds and in that kind of stress response, one of the best things we can do is not try and think our way into relaxation. You can't think your way into it, but you can relax the body, and the relaxation comes a lot easier that way.
Okay.
So that's been my gateway into it, doing movement or yoga or something. But really, when we're in a very thinky, stressy mindset, it's very difficult to think our way out of that. If not impossible. I haven't really been able to do that. It's more about like relaxing the body, going and changing your focus, going and doing something different. Is the thing that I've found most effective.
So that's quite reassuring for those of us who've tried mindfulness and stilling our mind and various other online programs of meditation. So things like stretching, going out for a walk, listening to the birds. I find letting a piece of chocolate melt in my mouth quite relaxing, just like that feeling of the chocolate melting. Now, is that something you would recommend, or does this...
Definitely. Sounds great. Chocolate meditation. I love it. Absolutely. And follow follow those things that, give yourself the permission to do more of what you love.
Oh, I love
joy,
it.
The biggest thing. Trust that that will, that it's okay, because I know sometimes we feel like we can't unhook from work. But what the beautiful thing is, I just took a week off actually, and I feel so much more productive right now.
Yeah.
So unhooking and letting yourself do the things you love allows you to be way, way, way more productive than when you just continuously going and doing. You'll get more. It's counterintuitive, but you'll get more done by bringing in more of the joy and the fun.
Okay, well, it's been wonderful talking to you, Jo. Thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you. You too.
Where can people find you if they would like to get a little bit more?
So I would love it if some of you stayed in touch with the project, if it's inspired you. And just so you know, there is a free challenge coming up, and you can register for it on thebodytalks.online/free-challenge/. And it's going to be in a private Facebook group where I will upload a video each day, which will go through the pedagogy that I use. So there'll be a theory part, a bit where we go into the body and experience it, and then we move into aligned action. And at the end of the free challenge, there's an options to go deeper into and do more work with me. And also, if you choose not to, that's perfect. I've had lots of people who have just done the challenge and have had some amazing breakthroughs. So I hope you join us and look forward to welcoming you in if you do.
So thanks again, Jo. And just for those who are interested, I am going to be in that Facebook group as well, because the challenge sounds like my cup of tea. So I hope to see you all in there. I will put the link for the challenge into the page for this. So if you head over to thisscientistsays.com/episode 10. Check out the summary for the notes for this podcast and the links to the books and challenges that Jo has recommended. And I look forward to seeing you next time.